Sorry, Okay, we'll call the regular meeting of Planning and Zoning Commission for the City of Pearland Monday, May 15th. It is 8:50. Let's see, who's not here? Let the record show Troy, Radia, and Daryl Eismer are not present. Moving on to item 2, the consent agenda. Looks like we have 2 items on the consent agenda. Item A, consideration possible action approval of minutes and excused absence. Item B, consideration possible action final plat of Kirby Crossing Section 2, replat number 1. Does anyone wish to remove any item from the consent agenda? Hearing none, do I hear a motion for approval? Have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor signify by raising your right hand. Motion passes 5-0. Moving on to item 3, new business. Item A, consideration and possible action, replat of New Harvest Christian Fellowship, replat number 1. This is a request of Kathy Fontenot, Survey 1, Inc., the applicant on behalf of Pearland New Harvest owner, for approval of a replat of New Harvest Christian Fellowship, replat number 1, creating 3 non-residential lots on 8.6346 acres of land located at 12,216 Broadway. Do I hear a motion?
I'll move to approve.
I'll second.
I have a motion and a second. Staff have a report.
Vince Husted, city staff. The recommendation staff has for the replat of New Harvest Christian Fellowship, replat number 1, for the following reasons. None of the properties will cross a zoning boundary. Normally, this would come in as a development plat that would be approved administratively. However, in this instance, since the church is zoned R1 single family, this was treated as a residential replat. In the end, this will result in 3 properties. 2 of the properties will be zoned OP, office professional, and the church will continue to be zoned R1 single family. And that concludes the staff presentation.
Is the applicant here? Do you wish to say anything? Okay. Give him a chance to speak. Commissioners have any questions for staff?
I'm good.
Okay. Have no questions. A motion and a second on the floor. All those in favor signify by raising your right hand. None opposed. Motion passes 5-0. Moving on to item B, consideration and possible action, preliminary plat of Riverstone Ranch, Section 9. This is a request of Jennifer Curtis of BGE, Carrie R. Gilbert and Associates, on behalf of Shannon Weisbape Meritage Homes, to approve the preliminary plat of Riverstone Ranch, Section 9, creating 121 single-family lots and 4 reserves. General location is south of Hughes Ranch Road, east of Clear Creek. Do I hear a motion?
I move that it be approved.
I'll second.
Have a motion and a second. Staff have a report.
Vince Husted, city staff. This property is, staff is recommending approval of the preliminary plat of the Riverstone Ranch Section 9 with the following condition, that the Riverstone Ranch cluster plan be amended prior to approval of a final plat. This property is zoned R1 cluster, so it is in a cluster plan area. The staff, the applicant did put in an application to amend the cluster plan because they have expanded ownership of their property in this area. However, specifically related to this case is that we do recommend approval of the preliminary plat on the condition that the cluster plan be approved before approval of a final plat. And that concludes the staff report.
Thank you. Commissioners have any questions on this one? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by raising your right hand. None opposed, motion passes 5-0. Moving on to item C, consideration and possible action, final plat of Baker's Landing, Section 3. This is a request of Jason Price, LJA Engineering, the applicant on behalf of DR Horton, Texas, limited owner, for approval of the final plat of Baker's Landing, Section 3, creating 8 single-family lots and 1 reserve of 1.371 acres of land. This is the north side of Cayman Lane between Galveston Avenue and Westland Lane.
I'll move to approve final plat Baker's Landing, Section 3.
I'll second.
Have a motion and a second. Staff have a report or things to add to this item?
Vince Husted, city staff. At the time this staff report went to presentation, in order to meet the deadline, staff was unable to recommend approval of the final plat of Baker's Landing Section 3 because at the time we had not had a subdivision improvement agreement that had been approved and signed and executed. However, the applicant did have a subdivision improvement agreement submitted, but we wanted to make sure that it was approved before we recommended approval. I have since received a copy of that fully executed subdivision improvement agreement, so staff would like to change its recommendation to recommend approval of Baker's Landing Section 3. And I will go ahead and pull up a map showing the location of the property in the Baker's Landing PUD, and that concludes staff report.
Thank you. Commissioners have any questions, comments for staff? Okay. All those in favor signify by raising your right hand. Motion passes 5-0. Moving on to item D, consideration and possible action, conditional use permit, application number CUP 17-00006. This is from our joint public hearing, 11,041 Shadow Creek Parkway. This is for a CUP to allow for a liquor package store and a planned unit development. Do I hear a motion?
I'll second.
Have a motion and a second. We've heard staff's report earlier. Do the commissioners, starting with Mary Starr, do you have any questions about this one?
So my only question is, do we even need the additional recommendations for this one at this time? Or should we go ahead and put them in now just in case any other kind of delays happen with the UDC updates?
That was our concern, is if the UDC winds up not going forward and tracking along with it, then.
You lose the opportunity here.
Exactly.
Okay.
I had one question. It was from staff's report, item 3, I believe, in the review and comments. On the recommendation for approval, you said that the location was not at the entrance of a neighborhood or residential area. Is that a criteria that y'all normally review when it comes to liquor and package stores?
That's one of our criteria that we're using, and we're keeping that as a consistent criteria on all packaged liquor stores, just so that way when one does come in that is at the entrance to a neighborhood, we can use that as an example that this would not be an appropriate place.
And that criteria, is at a distance, or in residential neighborhood, would multifamily be under that same umbrella?
we've looked at it as more residential neighborhoods, not as multifamily.
Because I've heard some comments tonight about trailer homes and things, and I just want to mention that in the city, we're residents. What home you choose to live in, I really hate calling out different residents based on what type of home they live in. So whether it's multifamily or a residential subdivision, if we're going to use that as a criteria, I think we need to have a means to report to council and the commission what that distance is, or if it's going to be used as a criteria. We've had every CUP that's come before us for liquor stores now passed. There's been no conditions other than the two items that we're going to work into the UDC. At some point, I would think, as well as with gas stations, which drove some of our current changes to the UDC, we're going to reach a point of liquor stores where people push back and say, no more. And what that point is, I don't know. I heard some of it, although no one came here to speak on it at the time, when there was a liquor store on each corner, which both have passed. I was opposed to one of them, but I just want to know what that gate is that we're going to trip that says we have too many liquor stores or too dense, because we haven't talked about that as a commission or a city. If it's a conditional use permit, what are the conditions of use, and what triggers that conditions being added? With gas stations, we've turned a gas station down just because that corner wasn't deemed okay for a gas station, where there's gas stations on other corners, and there was really no reason other than we didn't want it there. So I'm not giving any direction, just I'm curious as a commission what that gate is we're going to trip where we say there's too many liquor stores in the city, and now we need to say no or put a condition on them that I don't know what that definition is. Okay, I'll be quiet. So we have a motion and a second. We've had discussion. Are there any further comments about this CUP?
Do we need to include the? Okay.
If you wanted to include the conditions that staff's recommending, I would recommend that somebody amend the motion.
I'll do it. The chair wishes to amend the original motion to add staff's recommendations for lighting and bars to not be allowed.
I'll second it.
So we have a motion and a second to amend. All those in favor of the amended motion signify by raising your right hand. We now have an amended motion on the table with staff recommendations. All those in favor signify by raising your right hand. Motion passes 5-0 with staff's recommendations. Moving on to item E, consideration and possible action, zone change application number 17-00005. Also from our joint public hearing, a request of Richard Skotak, applicant, on behalf of Larry Darcy, owner, for approval of a change in zoning from multifamily MF zoning to general business zoning district on approximately 0.69 acres of land. This is the general location, 7501 Fight Road.
Motion to approve.
I'll second.
I have a motion and a second. Staff have any additional comments?
Staff just wants to reiterate right now that this particular use would, the way it stands right now, will contribute to spot zoning. Additionally, the parking is not in conformance with the code, the UDC code in regards to setback, size, and whatnot. And then this, just to reiterate, that it's a single family use on the property right now. It's residential, even though it's a non-conforming use. It's closer to the residential of the multifamily.
I'll start on your end. Do you have any comments, David?
My biggest comment is we zone the land, not what's there now. And if we change the zone, I think besides the spot zoning issue, it opens the door to a lot of unintended consequences right next to what are residential properties.
My comments on that, I heard some comments that, I'm pretty familiar with that. I lived here when that home was built. It's gotten significantly larger through the years. And for the reason I stated, we can't carve out one piece and spot zone that. The applicant's gonna have to work with staff and come back with a better suited plan for this body, because like I say, we zone the land. We always tend to look at that when we look at zone changes. It doesn't matter what business is there. And it's unfortunate that we've had realtors sell property to buyers without doing due diligence on zoning inside the city of Pearland. This is not the first one of these. It certainly won't be the last. But it puts us in a bind up here because we have to look at the best usage of the land. And for this one, I'm opposed. Further comments? All those in favor, signify by raising your right hand. All those opposed? Motion is denied, 0-5. Moving on to item F, consideration of possible action, zone change application number 17-00007. This is a request of Kevin Cole, applicant, on behalf of Anthony and Kimberly Giuliani, owner, for the approval of a change in zoning from single-family residential R1 to general business GB zoning on approximately 9.6135 acres of land. This is at 3205 Dixie Farm Road, and the subject of our previous joint public hearing. Do I hear a motion?
Motion to approve. I'll second.
Have a motion and a second. Staff have any items to add, comments to add to this one?
Again, this is a single-family home that is used for residential. As it stands right now, there's a single-family home on the property.
I'll start on Mary's end. Do you have any questions?
Well, my biggest question is, how long could it remain a single family when it's right next to Home Depot? I really think that it shouldn't be single family, but I'm not sure what it should be at this point.
I'm not really that concerned about the house that's there now. I'm pretty sure they're gonna scrape it anyway whenever they do redevelopment. And it doesn't matter what kind of redevelopment they're gonna do, but something's gonna go there. Eventually, something's gonna go there. I heard a lot of comments about the traffic concerns along Dixie Farm and 518. TxDOT's not gonna widen 518 in this area anytime soon, so I wouldn't get excited about that. It's not even on their statewide planning map. Dixie Farm, it's not a state road, so, you know, it would have to get on the CIP program and all that kind of fun stuff. I'm not necessarily opposed to this change.
Yeah, for me, if I were Mr. Lopez, I wouldn't want to see an expansive general business appear on that property right next to my home, but it doesn't feel that it should be a residential property. So I'm opposed to general business, but I would like to see it be revisited as office professional, something that creates a buffer between something like Home Depot and a residence.
I don't know if staff has spoken with the applicant to see if office professional is something that they're willing to do. if this body were inclined to do that, you can go from a GB zone request and make it a less intense use, but you might be doing that thinking you're doing the applicant a favor, and that might not be something the applicant is willing or wanting to do. And if that's the direction the body would like to take, I would recommend either asking the applicant for clarification on that this evening, or postponing and allowing staff and the applicant to have that conversation. And then we can come back, since we've had the JPH on it, we can go to a less intense use than the GB category. And that might facilitate it. And if that is what they're inclined to do after having a conversation with staff, they may not have to pay the additional fees to do an additional zone change. Of course, I'm going to turn back over to the planning staff. They work with these applications on a daily basis, and they might have better ideas or better responses to that. But those are my initial thoughts in regards to what I heard both at the JPH and then here from this body this evening.
I think my comments are in line with David's. I don't know that GB's, I'm comfortable with GB because of the intense usage it can get, being right up against residential. I also don't I don't totally understand the future land use plan lines, how they fell where they fell. There's got to be a buffer zone in between residential and commercial. It can't just go straight from GB to residential. There's got to be some way to buffer that. And if Mr. Cole would like to speak along that, we might come up with.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman and the Planning Commission. You know, I think talking over with the owners, I don't know about an office professional, but I think a meeting in the middle between GB and office professional would be a neighborhood services, which would allow even more uses that are allowed by right in a general business to even to be a CUP, type of approach moving forward. So many of the types of things that we would like to make sure that we just have the ability to do fall completely out of OP. I mean, it just, not even with the CUP. So our thoughts that we would accept tonight would be a neighborhood services approach as opposed to an OP, simply because a lot of those uses you can allow would be required to have a CUP to move forward, which will allow an individual applicant or an individual use to come in and plead their case, whereas light retail, those types of things would still be allowed by right. Even neighborhood services, a daycare would have to come in and do a CUP, which I thought was kind of crazy for neighborhood services, but we would accept a neighborhood services approach.
There are several areas around the city that have general business that butt up right against residential. It's all over the place, all along 518.
All along 518, there's, taking residential street like Morenci Avenue, Morenci Drive, that's all residential except for the parcels on 518. But if the future land use plan map cuts into that street by 3 or 4 lots, there'll never be general business unless somebody come in and bought out 6 homes. In this case, much larger piece of property that's unique. It's got a pipeline running through it, which is one of my pet peeves of pieces of property that are developed. When the last plan come through, the building proposed was right on the pipeline easement, which is ridiculous to even put on a map to present. That usage would be allowed in GB, and what I'm hearing from 50 people, whether they're form letters or direct neighbors, is no to GB. I mean, that's pretty clear. And I'm not going to sit up here and say, I don't hear you. I think we need a compromise. Everybody agrees, I believe, what I'm hearing is that that property is gonna be developed some way for business of some sort. It just needs to be something that's fitting to buffer that, you know, you're the guy, you're stuck between Home Depot and a residence. You have to, there's gonna be something there that's gonna make the city upset if you do it. So if that's, if the applicant's willing to accept that, I would, as the chair, wish to amend the, can I do this as the, amending the application to,
You would amend, Apologies. The amendment would be to approve this as NS, if that's the category that you're going to. And then that would be all that the amendment is required to do.
okay, the chair wishes to amend the approval to be for neighborhood services instead of general business. I have a motion and a second to amend. All those in favor of the amendment, signify by raising your right hand. We have 5-0 in favor of amending the motion for approval of neighborhood services in lieu of general business. Any further discussion? All those in favor, signify by raising your right hand. None opposed, motion passes 5-0.
Prior to the next item, I just wanted to point out that there was a difference in the motion and in staff recommendation for an earlier item on the agenda. I think when I mentioned the need for the amendment to include staff recommendations, I read some body language and it made me wonder if that was meant to happen. And if that is the
I looked back at
case.
that, it was for a preliminary plat, so we're good with that.
For Riverstone, okay.
Yes. I was, that's, because we could do that before the final plat comes to us or as a condition of the final plat. I thought that same thing, but it's for preliminary plat, so we're good there.
Okay. Thanks.
Moving on to item G, consideration possible action amendments to Unified Development Code UDC number T25 zone 17-0008.
I'll second.
I have a motion and a second. Does staff wish to clarify anything or add any comments to the presentation in the joint public hearing? Mary, you have any questions to clarifications on this one?
I don't know, is it necessary to add the yoga to this? Isn't that, what were all the things that were in that one? There was dance schools. I can't remember which.
It says martial arts studio, dance and drama studio, tutoring centers, and learning centers.
Can you bring up the presentation with that?
Maybe we should expand it to cover a little bit more.
So non-residential zoning under neighborhood services, a conditional use permit would be required. It's not allowed in multifamily. Not accepted uses, even with a CUP. Is it yoga studio or dance studio? Is that the same thing? Let me ask this. What is a yoga studio classified as in our UDC? Where would that fall?
So, I would think that a yoga studio, the core aspect of a yoga studio is physical fitness. So, in my mind, just without on the spot. I think a yoga studio would fit more in line with a health club than a taekwondo,
Classes.
so somewhere where there is a class.
Martial arts is the same thing. I mean, it's not the same thing, but it's a class.
True, I can see that there are similarities.
What was the driver behind this change? What motivated the city to change this portion of the UDC?
The use was literally allowed across the board except for NOP.
I was just wondering if somebody come in wanting to put this type of business in OP and couldn't.
There was discussion from someone, they haven't made any application, but that was kind of the thing that alerted us to the fact that it is across the board, either conditional or permitted somewhere.
I would think that if you were to have a yoga studio that is only a yoga studio and not in a place where you would have gym equipment, that a yoga studio would fit into this category versus a gym. Now, if they had additional equipment, like a 24-hour fitness, then it would be the health club.
Then it's something else.
Right. So is there, because basically the space that you do yoga in is very similar, if not the same, as a dance studio or a martial arts studio. The flooring is similar, the walls are similar. And could you not add yoga to this? I mean, if everybody agreed with.
I mean, dance studio, yoga studio, kind of same thing to me.
And I would like to add too, each application and each use is different, and that's why we would, staff would prefer to determine the use per application basis, because a yoga studio could have various components to it, so it's per use basis or application basis.
And I don't,
I mean, clearly, we're trying to tie this back to that.
Right.
and we can't do that.
But we have to remember that there's also a wellness facility involved there.
Right.
Well, yeah, I know
I
that.
don't know what that means. Is that treadmills? Is that?
So this happens to be on our agenda tonight, and looking at this and looking back in history of something we've already acted on, we have this in front of us for a certain reason, that the city put it in front of us. I'm okay with this as it is, and the other issue will have to be dealt with on its own with staff and the details of that property and that issue separate from this.
Well, I think it might come up more than on just that one, though.
Anybody have any other comments on the lighting? Like I said, just follow up, if you could, follow up with engineering on the existing installations and see if those are possibly out of code for the installation. And on the food trucks, does anybody have any comments on the food trucks? So I do understand that anyone can get a permit for food trucks. I misunderstood that portion. This is specific only to breweries. So I don't have any issues. I just want to make sure that it's fair in the truck per acreage. If a brewery came in somewhere that didn't have that, but they could still get a food truck permit, right?
Well, and just to clarify something from before, Backfish is 2.938 acres. So rounding up, that's 3 acres. You would get the 3 truck maximum under this new, the proposed.
The other comment was on the screening. I kind of agree with I forget who made the comment about the food trucks being a draw themselves. So you would want to see them there. If they're screened, that's not a draw to
But in the parking already has screening requirements, correct? So the whole point, I think, of that is if you're screening the parking, the food trucks are part of the parking lot, they have to maintain the same requirements, correct?
Well, and the parking lot screening is generally kept to a lower standard,
Okay,
so that way, cars are lower vehicles. You get a food truck, it's much higher. So that's,
it's
there's
a little
two
more
different
stringent.
types of screening.
okay.
I guess the only other comment I have there, and I think I mentioned it before, is the noise that these trucks produce sometimes is an issue. If a business is going to be allowed by this change to have food trucks by right, if they're that type of business, it would, my RV has a generator. When I take it somewhere, it's noisy. If there's a place to plug it in, I plug it in because it's noisy and you don't want to use it when it's noisy. A food truck, I'm assuming they have a way of plugging in a landline to a food truck. If these businesses are going to have these trucks there, you would think it would be to their advantage to have a place to plug these trucks in. If it's part of it's something they want to do with their business and reduce the noise to the surrounding area and make that a moot point for anyone that would be opposed to it. Certainly can't make them do that, but if you're going to have food trucks there all the time, you certainly wouldn't want 3 generators going at the same time and try to enjoy that atmosphere. That's just personal opinion. So,
If you'd like, I might be able to address some of your issues, Commissioner Tunstall. The first was whether other places in the city can operate food trucks, and they can with a special use permit. They just can't do it on a consistent basis. So I believe they're limited to 4 events per year, unless it's an accessory use to their building. And most buildings, a food truck would not be. I can't think of any places where a food truck would be an accessory use right now, but I haven't gone through the entire UDC to verify that. In regards to the screening issue that was mentioned, I think the screening of parking lots really is meant to get the hedgerow just above where the parking lights are. In large part, that is to stop those lights from shining out on the traffic and creating conflict points or hazards or something like that. As Martin indicated, food trucks typically have higher things. Sometimes they're in a really nice retrofitted Airstream and they don't have any additional height on them. Other times they're a motorhome. So we would expect some screening, but it doesn't have to be up to the top of the food truck. This commission, when it evaluates the CUP for the microbrewery, can address that issue and determine where the food trucks are being parked and then how high that screening needs to be to make sure that it doesn't become an issue. Similarly, it can look at the adjacency issues in regards to the noise. If you're going to put a food truck there, I think the purpose of this was to try to make sure that it's not next to residential when that CUP gets approved, so it doesn't create noise for the nearby residential traffic, but also if, it just creates a large noise issue, that it can be designed so that it has some sort of buffers to kind of catch that noise and stop it from spilling over. Or you could reduce that buffer when you consider it in the CUP process if they have electrical outlets for those trucks to park in and don't have to operate off of generator power. That often brings the negative effects of food trucks that some people complain about. That you described. So all of those things could be considered as parts of the CUP process for the microbrewery as it allows the food truck on site.
thank you.
Mr. Chairman, can I
Sure. You could just state your name and address for the record.
Charles Buck Stevens, 4701 West Orange, Pearland, Texas, 77581. I'm trying to see into the future. So when new applicants come in under a cup, under those 3 or 4 types of breweries, the CUP will address screening issues. Will there be a time that the screening for the parking be in conflict with, let's say they put the trucks, or the end-up result of those trucks will be near the roadway that's abutting 518, for example. will there be a conflict of the property screening requirements and the relatively a little bit higher screening requirements for a food truck that abuts a Broadway? I'm just trying to negate maybe issues that come up in the future. And I guess when a person applies for that cup, the CUP, they're going to be, in their CUP, they'll be giving a little bit higher hedges or some type of pre-approved screening that's going to meet that standard, I guess, up against the, I guess what I'm saying is, right now, there's a height maximum on a CUP on screening that abuts 518, for example. Now you're fixing to tell, if they put a food truck right up next to that, I guess one overrides the other? I don't know that. That's why I'm just trying to make sure that a future person may be able to decipher that.
Thank you for your comments. To follow up on that, I'm assuming that when the CUP comes in, we'll address where the trucks will be on the property and how they'll be screened, or that, correct, Mark?
We would assume that there's going to be a site plan. Of course, the city council is currently reviewing all CUP applications and what standards need to be in there. But as it stands now, staff would expect a site plan. And I believe the standards are written as a minimum for those screening regulations, so, and not as a maximum. So it wouldn't be a conflict. It would be a choice on the developer if they want the food truck. They, instead of putting in the minimum, they might have to go up to a higher minimum. But again, that's going to be something that's in your discretion. Your discretion to review as you review the
Because I remember
application.
we had quite the conversation about where the food trucks would be at Backfish, and for all I know, every time I've driven by there, I haven't seen an issue with food trucks. I don't know what the issue would be, because that business is well screened and well laid out, so I haven't seen food trucks other than where we told them they were to be.
And that screening goes well above what a commercial standard of screening is at that site. Just throwing that out
And additionally, the CUP will allow with the site plan to work out the details of the landscape.
And that property had a little age to it too, so it had the bushes and things were already grown up. Okay, any other issues to change, recommend? Okay, all those in favor signify by raising your right hand. None opposed, item passes 5-0. And if y'all could pass along the comments to council on the recommendation that some of us had, that would be great. Moving on to item 4, discussion items, Commissioners' Activity Report.
I did go to the APA conference in New York. I'm not ready to present anything because there's a lot of stuff. But I also, besides going to the planning and zoning type ones, I also went to some of the transportation ones, sessions that were there, and it was very interesting to hear how optimistic everybody is about how traffic nightmares are going to go away when cars go automated. So I thought that was pretty interesting and kind of hilarious as a traffic engineer. But hopefully by the next meeting, I'll have my notes together and everything, and I can talk, at least present a little bit more about it.
Anyone else? And the next P&Z regular meeting, June 5th, and that will still be in this location, correct? Following up, item 3, July to September, I guess we'll be at the Public Service. Public Safety Building, sorry. Anything else from staff? Anything else from commissioners? We will